So we're good? Ready?
Ready to go.
We are ready to go. Okay. So welcome to the Glengarry Bench, episode 02. I just love this we're doing. We have Eric Duncan in with us today. Thank you so much, Eric, for coming in.
You didn't scare me off last time, so I came back.
I'm glad that's a good thing, and I'm glad that when you came in, you said, "Oh, you like the vibe of the studio."
Yeah.
Being in the hot seat, but it's at least it's a good thing that it's not too much of a hot seat.
You bet.
So again, welcome once again to Glengarry Bench. This is a segment where Glengarians get a front row seat to what's happening on Parliament Hill. So it's hosted by us, Glengarry TV, and we follow the MP Eric Duncan. He shares his updates, insights, behind the scenes perspective, and the issues shaping our country. So welcome again, Eric. So Parliament resumed its current session, the 45th Parliament on September 15, 2025, following a summer break. So this marks the continuation of the session that officially began May 26th. So there's a lot of high stakes issues that you're following and you're participating in. We sort of follow you on Instagram and on Facebook and on your socials. The federal budget, economic uncertainties and national legislation. So let's start with Bill C2, the Strong Borders Act. This is a government bill. It's the first substantial bill of the session, and its title is such, the Strong Borders Act, and it's an act that respecting certain measures relating to security along of the border between Canada and the U.S., respecting other related security measures. So it was introduced early in this particular session. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, given that the U.S. border is closed to our riding, it's actually in the writing,
yep.
Right? So what concrete impact or concerns that residents and even businesses should raise about this particular bill, and how is it, especially in terms of trade, movement, local economy, and of course, security?
Yeah. Well, so having strong borders going both ways, not only the Americans have demanded that Canada step up and do better border enforcement. When it comes to it's also a two-way street. We have a lot of illegal firearms, for an example, human trafficking that comes both from the United States into Canada. And so sadly, our area and our part of the St. Lawrence River is very prone to that. And so having very strong border measures, having the resources necessary to combat all of that is absolutely essential. And so one of the things, this bill aside, one of the things in the last couple of years is we have a border integrity unit, which is composition of the OPP, Cornwall City Police, AMPS, the Akwesasne Mohawk Police Service, the RCMP, CBSA, and all these other law enforcement partners that work together to try to protect along the border. Huge challenge we've had, and I realized this in speaking with frontline law enforcement. That agency and the Border Integrity Unit wasn't funded 24/7.
Oh, wow.
So what was happening was at midnight, the staff were going home and coming back at 7 o'clock the next morning. Well, what time do you think most illegal activity when it comes from drug smuggling, human smuggling, gun smuggling, and other nefarious activities take place?
Yeah.
They take place probably during those times. So only recently did the government, when fairly forced to into a corner, commit to funding 24/7 the Border Integrity Unit. So I'm watching to make sure it ramps up and gets to that 24/7 service. On Bill C2, you're right, that was the first bill the Liberals did bring in, and it wasn't without controversy because there were some measures in there that were modernizations to make sure information flows between all these agencies better. But there's two things that they did that were quite controversial, and they've since had to backtrack on both of those, and they've reintroduced a new bill minus these two things. The first was they were going to be banning cash transactions between borders, between Canada and the U.S. Of over $10,000. There's still a lot of people that use cash to go and buy farm equipment and go back and forth. That was very unpopular and seen as an attack on kind of civil liberties and privacy rights. The other thing that was very big was they were going to give themselves warrantless access to open people's Canada Post mail. So they were, if something was suspicious coming through, they wouldn't have to get a warrant to be able to open the mail. And so our whole legal process is to say, look, we need to clamp down letter mail, parcels, all of that. If drugs are being smuggled in through mailing processes, but if there is a package that is suspicious, it should be set aside. A warrant, which is very easy to obtain through a judiciary, can be done, and all that can be done. So the Liberals kind of failed in their first approach on C2, where they've had to backtrack on some of the very contentious items on that. But I'm watching the bill very closely because, to your point into the question, it does matter a lot in our region to have
Hmm.
24/7 funded service, and then this bill as well to make sure there's not red tape that's stopping all these agencies from working together.
So where are we right now in the bill? Is it been you've mentioned that it's been reintroduced with some modifications.
Still at second reading, so it hasn't been referred to committee yet at this point. So it's still being debated in the House of Commons at this point. And I imagine there's going to be extensive scrutiny from stakeholders and experts and witnesses that committee they're going to want to testify to it as well. So because the government kind of it backfired their original bill, I think there's going to be some extra scrutiny on it in the coming months as it works its way through the legislative process.
Okay. Okay. So from Bill C2 to Bill C5, the one Canadian Economy Act. So this was introduced as a response to the new U.S. tariffs and economic pressures. So it empowers the federal cabinet to fast track major infrastructures and resource projects deemed as national interests. So this bill is called the Henry VIII clause. Okay, it allows the government to override or modify certain or existing laws and expedite approvals, aiming to boost economic resilience and trade flow. However, it's drawn a lot of criticism from Indigenous and environmental groups who warn it could weaken consultation obligations, and as well sideline some local Indigenous voices. Now, my question is to you: in a riding like Glengarry, where resource projects may be fewer, and community Indigenous relationships are still very, very vital. How do you balance the desire for like faster economic growth, because we are up against the ropes with some of the Trump tariffs,
Yeah.
with the safeguards required to ensure small town rural residents, including Indigenous concerns?
So all this being said, is they're not mutually exclusive, the two goals. You can have consultation, you can have all those environmental protections and rules, but you can have an orderly, streamlined process for an answer to get to yes, to make sure things are being consultations are being done with everyone impacted, including Indigenous communities and others. And you can also make sure that there's not this duplication and red tape where there's a federal approval process and a provincial approval process and a municipal approval process where there's a lot of overlap. So I don't think there's anybody that disagrees that there is too much red tape right now
Mm-hmm.
in terms of all these projects. And often the levels of government work in silos on projects where they're not working together and not eliminating those duplications. We voted for Bill C5 to advance and to become law because we need to do better on this. We are in a much more tough economic circumstance. As you mentioned now, we need to get more projects, shovels in the ground faster. So in the spirit and the principle of the bill, we support it, but to say it doesn't mean that consultations won't and still can't happen, and doesn't mean that environmental protections won't be there. But again, simplifying that process in an answer of getting to yes and checking the boxes, dotting your I's, crossing your T's could all be done, but be done much more efficiently. The other key thing about this, and a difference, although we did support the legislation C5, one of the things I remain concerned about is the Liberals' answer to everything is to create a new bureaucracy or a new office.
Mm.
So to get all these major projects done, they've created a major projects office, a new bureaucracy, but with a CEO that's making, I think it's something like $500,000 a year, and a whole new bureaucracy that said, oh, we're going to cut the red tape by adding another layer. They've done this in housing. We have the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. We have CMHC. We have the Housing Ministry and Department itself. We have infrastructure banks. And now they say, well, we're going to get more stuff done. We're going to create Build Canada Homes, a new bureaucracy to help. Every time we're adding these new layers and new agencies, I actually think it makes it more complex. We need less government intervention, less government regulation to get some of these things done, and done in a proper process that, at the same point, going back before, can still ensure the environmental protections and all those consultations. So we did support it. It is important to have all those discussions and things, but it doesn't mean that we can't put timelines on it. Doesn't mean that we can't move things along. A lot of these projects shouldn't be a surprise to communities. They've been talked about for a long time. So it's addressing what those concerns are, balancing all those, and at the end of the day, if a project is deemed worthy, move ahead and let's get shovels in the ground.
So the bill has been passed?
The bill's been passed, I believe. If it's not through the Senate, it's in the Senate right now. If it's not been passed, but our work in the House of Commons is done on that bill.
Okay, all right. So the budget. So that's the big. This is the key question.
What everyone's talking about.
What everybody's talking about, and one of the reasons, maybe there's a reason why we were here, and we need to discuss it. So it's known. The budget is also known as a Budget Implementation Act, and then the 2025-26 budget is controversial because it combines, record high deficits with new spendings. So it cuts to public services, and there's sort of debate over fiscal responsibility, and it carries a high political stakes. Confidence. For example, it's a vote on it could actually trigger another election.
Yep.
And that's important, and that's why we have this particular system, for checks and balances to say that there isn't an absolute power, and I think that's important. So my first question to you is that on November 7th, 2025, you voted against the budget policy amendment. So could you walk us through your key concerns about the budget and how perhaps it might impact regions like Glengarry?
For sure. Well, a lot of it comes down, what's all politics is local, but it's the same national trend that we see everywhere. We put out in advance of the budget, we made it very clear as Conservatives, the Liberals are in a minority setting, so they have to find a dance partner. And it's their responsibility, and they're the ones tabling and putting together the budget. They've got to find at least one opposition party to go along in support, or maybe with the NDP, maybe they might abstain, they might vote for it. I'm not sure what will happen there. But we came out as Conservatives well in advance of the budget to say, look, if you're going to be seeking our support, we have to rein in the deficits, the out of control deficits that we've seen in the last few years, and actually the last 10 years. If you remember all the way back in 2015 when the Liberals came into office, they were going to have these teeny tiny temporary deficits and get back to a balanced budget by 2019. Well, since 2019, the budget has never been balanced, and our debt now is $1.3 trillion nationally. The service our debt, we spend more, just by context, we spend more money paying the interest on our national debt than we do on healthcare transfers now. And one of the other things is, if all the GST collected right now in the country, the 5% that you pay on everything in your purchases, all that GST doesn't even go to cover now the interest on the debt. So all the GST that's collected is just going to pay down the interest, not pay, I should clarify, not pay down the deficit, just pay the interest that we're paying on all of this. It's not sustainable. So we said they have to rein in spending and cap their budget on what they had said last year. They had promised only a $42 billion deficit. Then during the campaign, Mark Carney said it would be $62 billion. Well, here we are 6 months after the election, and the deficit is near $80 billion. It is not sustainable. It's got hundreds of billions of dollars in new spending. It's going to add $320 billion to our deficit over the course of the next 5 years, and it's not sustainable for many reasons, for the debt that we're accumulating. But the other thing is, whenever you're going into deficit and you're money printing, that is driving inflation, and we've seen inflation be a stubborn issue. The cost of groceries, the cost of living, it's because when you're printing more money and more money is going into the economy, that leads to inflationary prices. So when you have an $80 billion deficit again, and you've got these deficits into the tens of billions of dollars every single year, and the interest that's costing to pay down or pay our debts, and the interest on our debts is ballooning every year, it's just not sustainable. So they tabled a budget that was absolutely the opposite of what we said we would want to see if we were going to be a dance partner in any way. Could it lead to an election? It could, depending on what the Bloc or the NDP do. But from a principled perspective, we just ran an election 6 months ago to Canadians and got 8 million votes and dozens of more MPs saying we need to rein in spending. We need to rein in the deficit. We need to get taxes under control. We need to lower and stop these increases on food prices. The budget didn't deliver any of that. So we just, in good faith and in principle, cannot support it. People blame us and say, well, that's not right. You're not supporting the budget. The Liberals had an opportunity to find an opportunity to come together on some of our key priorities, and they literally met none of them.
Mm. So, so as sort of my follow-up question, which you touched upon. So it's a matter of confidence in the
Yeah.
parliament, and it may trigger an election if it fails. So how do you view your role? And you've been very vocal
Mhm.
in parliament. How do you view your role representing Glengarry in that particular broader process?
Yeah, well, and it's talking about this financial sustainability. I go back to my time when I was a mayor. The easiest job in public life, whenever you're in politics as an elected official dealing with budgets, the easiest thing you can do is tell people what you're going to spend money on. The hard part is how you're going to pay for it. And this budget is, I call it a credit card budget. It is putting a massive amount on of spending and new spending, unsustainable spending on Canada's national credit card. And so it does matter to Glengarrians because it does drive up inflation. It does drive up housing prices. It does drive up the cost of living when we have these inflationary deficits that keep happening. And we see the correlation, the ties to between that. So whether it's in Glengarry or whether it's in the East Coast somewhere or Vancouver Island, it's the same national challenge that we've got. Part of our other thing as well is making sure we get our fair share. The housing programs that the Liberals are offering, we're not even eligible to apply here the way that our housing model is set up for developing social housing and affordable housing.
Oh,
So the
really?
Liberals have got a lot of red tape that are still in the way, and they've had many years to try to address that. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus has tried to address it and had no luck with it either. So we need to definitely change the way that Ottawa does business and the way that Ottawa spends, because otherwise, whether you're in Glengarry or any other part of the country, it's just not sustainable. And when we look at
So these
affordability, there's not
particular,
stuff
so
there.
these particular, these particular grants or the way that the government is setting this up would make it difficult for Glengarry to access these funds.
Because the way that housing is built, affordable housing units through social housing is built, is through Cornwall and SDNG housing services.
Okay.
And the government doesn't recognize them as the service manager, doesn't allow them to apply because they're saying the local municipality has to apply. Well, North Glengarry, the township itself, is not in the business of building housing and maintaining housing.
Okay.
That goes in that portfolio. So it's a bunch of red tape that's gone on for years that's barred SDNG and Cornwall from even being able to apply for some of these housing programs the Liberals tout as being their signature housing policy.
And that wasn't addressed in their making up these
In the new programs, they haven't
programs.
clarified that they're going to do this. They haven't, and still in some of the existing programs, they still haven't fixed it yet. So all these new ones that are going to come in, if they're going to be following the same eligibility, it's going to be setting us further and further behind and not getting our fair share.
Okay. Um, let's move on to something like a little different. Remembrance Day. You've
Mm.
Remembrance Day, November 11th was Remembrance Day in Canada, and it marks a deeper reflection on veterans' service and sacrifice especially for rural ridings in Glengarry. They're very rich in military histories and local veteran communities, especially meaningful. But some say it's lived in our communities lived pretty much every day.
Yeah.
So you've taken part in Remembrance Day ceremonies across the region. So what moments stood out for you as and beyond the formal tributes? What does living remembrance mean to you?
Well, I had the honor of being at 8 Remembrance Day services across SDNG. I think there's about 15 services that take place, and I try to rotate each year where I go. And the one thing I was impressed with was, despite some of the weather, Saturday before had good weather that day in Maxville. Sunday, I did 4 services, and we had ice rain coming down sideways and wind and snow, but there were still hundreds of people out at the local services. And the same on Remembrance Day, despite the snow that we had. In Cornwall, there were thousands of people. Martintown, when I was there in the afternoon, there was a couple hundred that filled the community hall for the indoor service that was moved to. And I was moved at the fact that as our veterans, particularly the Second World War, there's not many that are left. And so when it comes to remembering the First and Second World War and the service and sacrifices of the brave men that went overseas for our country, we have an obligation now as a community to remember and be there, wear the poppy in the Remembrance Week in the lead up to Remembrance Day, but to attend services and provide the education of who these men and women were that did serve and those that are still serving around the world today. So it was nice to see the good turnout at the services from the public. And one of the other personal passions I have as a volunteer in the last couple of years, I've been working with local legions and restoring and revitalizing some of our local cenotaphs. So I've been working on several projects in SD&G. We've got a few done already. I've been doing it about 4 or 5 years. And I've already got a list going for 2026 and 2027. But it's been maybe in some cases 40, 50, 60 years since some of these cenotaphs and monuments have been restored. So we're working with fundraising and Veterans Affairs Canada and our local legions to clean them up, add lighting, add some nice landscaping so we can make sure those permanent tributes to our veterans are in good shape and are seen by all day and night.
Yeah, it makes it very much an everyday living history.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So, do you have any final words? Something maybe you want to communicate to some of the constituents? Like I said, you've been working hard. We follow you. It's good that you are present on social media and that people actually do make the effort to share what you actually do. But do you have anything that you want to add to this?
No, I continue to be honored to enjoy the role that I have as the member of parliament. I always say I get my meals and miles in, especially on a recess week in all parts of SD&G, but I'm back to Ottawa next week. And we're going to keep fighting on the issues that are important, the financial sustainability in the budget, getting our fair share of dollars here, and addressing some of the key challenges we have, the tariffs that are still a major issue and impediment to our economic growth, getting our own projects built in our country, addressing housing, addressing immigration. There's a lot of challenges we're facing, but I'm always invigorated to go out and do that and take the feedback of what I hear on these recess weeks and the feedback from folks in Glengarry and all parts of SD&G, take that to Ottawa and try to affect some positive change. So
Perfect.
there's never a dull day, we say.
Yeah. So, Eric, thanks for coming in. I hope that we can continue to have, our member of parliament come in once in a while for this debrief. It's very, very much appreciated. So, I always tell folks, please follow us, subscribe, subscribe to ourselves, go and check out Eric's feeds, and subscribe to us. We're trying to bring you a little bit of what's actually going on politically. Eric, always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
Boom. And we're out.
There we go. Perfect.